Sports Central, we go over our next team prediction of this offseason, and this could be over one of the top teams in the SEC from the 2020 season, and that was the Texas A&M Aggies. This team was 9-1 overall in the 2020 season. Only loss was to Alabama last year, and this team overall, outside of that game, was an outstanding team. But how they be in 2021 is what we're going over here today. We're going to go ahead and get started with Texas A&M's prediction, and we're going to be starting out with your season trends from 2020. And of course, you were 9-1 overall. Once again, not a terrible season at all. I mean, this team played very well over the course of the season. They beat Florida 41-38. That was a big win. Beat Arkansas, who was good. Beat LSU. Also beat Auburn 31-20 on the road. And that was before beating North Carolina in their bowl game. 41-27 was the final score there. So this Aggie team played very well last season. Definitely one of the more talented Texas A&M teams I've seen in the past few years. And I mean, when you see, this team beat Florida and North Carolina, two teams of which were outstanding last season. And I mean, if you consider, Arkansas, Auburn, and LSU were all halfway decent as well, even though they weren't the best teams in the conference. But yeah, Texas A&M overall last season was a great team, and this team is returning a huge amount of their production from last season, which is going to be huge going into the 2021 season. I mean, if you look at the quarterback position, that's really the only question mark that I see on this team. I mean, you've got of course Kellen Mond, who was your starter for several years, and he will not be back for next season. So now we got a new quarterback. It's either Haynes King or Calzada. We'll have to see what happens there, but either one of those quarterbacks will more than likely be starting for next season. You've got a couple others other than them, but I'm assuming it'll either be King or Calzada from what I've seen in the reports. And I mean, Haynes King does have he has a little bit of experience with this team. I mean, he did play a little bit last season, even though it wasn't for very long. But for sure, I think Haynes King is probably your most favorable pick to at least start in week 1. But we'll have to see what happens there. Calzada is definitely on the rise as well. As for the running back position, you look great there. You got Isaiah Spiller coming back. He was your top running back, 1,200 yards last season, 9 touchdowns. And then Aeneas Smith is also coming back. He was your second running back with 850 total yards last season. So you got 2 great running backs coming back for this team. That's going to be huge going into 2021. As far as it goes for the receiving core, of course, you got Jalen Weidermeyer, who is also coming back. He was your tight end, and of course he's a great tight end for sure. He's definitely got a very bright future. 500 yards with this team and 6 touchdowns is what he had. Chase Lane is also coming back. He was your top wide receiver, putting up just over 400 yards. Hezekiah Jones is also coming back, your second wide receiver there. So all around, skill players positions look excellent for this team. Only question mark once again on this team, in my opinion, is the quarterback position. I mean, you got 2 great quarterbacks here with King and Calzada. It's just a matter of who's going to start. And the thing is too, is that, we haven't seen a full definitive sight on which quarterback is going to start for 1, but for 2, whether or not they can lead Texas A&M to a great season. I mean, both quarterbacks are talented, but for Texas A&M being a team that's got as much talent as they do, if this team gets a good quarterback, Texas A&M is a very dangerous team, and I think this team definitely has got the talent to be able to at least make a run for the SEC West Division next season. Alabama's going to be a tough team once again, and LSU is also going to be really tough. But Alabama and LSU both, I think, are going to be in the running with Texas A&M for that division title. But as for it goes for the offensive line, you lose 3 on there. You lose two linebackers and then 1 defensive lineman. Defensive line looks great otherwise. And the secondary as well is returning just about everyone. So defensive side looks excellent for this team. You do lose 3 starters, but that's not a lot in comparison to a lot of teams. So really, Texas A&M looks great next season. I think this team in general has got a tremendous amount of potential for next season, and they just got to win their important games is what they have to do. They cannot lose a game that they shouldn't lose, because that could easily ruin their chances of winning the division. It's pretty safe to say that Alabama, Texas A&M, and LSU, the winner of the division in the SEC West, is more than likely going to have 11 to 12 wins. It's just a matter of which team's going to get it. And I think Texas A&M is definitely worthy of doing that. I think Texas A&M could make a run at it. They do have a tougher schedule, but this team is definitely capable, I think, with the talent that they do have. Potential college football playoff dark horse is another big question, and I think this team, if they make it to the SEC championship game, which would be a huge achievement for this team, beating out Alabama, which, once again, Alabama is going to be a great team, but it is possible. Texas A&M, if this team can beat Alabama and win that division, this team could easily be in the running for that college football playoff. And the tough thing for Texas A&M in the past few years, and I think we all can agree here, Texas A&M being in the same division with Alabama has been very tough on this team. I mean, if this team was in a different conference, for example, like if this team was in the Pac-12, they've got the talent level to be easily the Pac-12 champion. It's just, I mean, they're in a very tough division and a very tough conference, and that's been pretty tough for this team in trying to make it to the college football playoff. But looking at your schedule now, you start the season with Kent State. You got a former Big 12 rivalry game against Colorado there in the September 11th. That's going to be in Boulder. Then you got New Mexico, of course, after that. Arkansas in a neutral location. Mississippi State after that. Then you got your Alabama game at home on October 9th. You got Missouri then on the road. South Carolina at home. You got Auburn also at home. Ole Miss is on the road. Prairie View A&M. Then you've got that before your big game against LSU. That could be a huge game in the case that we see a pretty close race for the top of the division. But anyway, looking at the first 4 games here, your September, I say you go 4-0 in your first 4 games. I think Kent State, New Mexico, Arkansas are all going to be easy wins, more than 14 points there. But Colorado, I'm actually going to say that's a closer game. I think with it being on the road, Colorado also is actually a good team. They were a good team last season, and if they can continue on that in 2021, we could see Colorado play pretty well. But I do think, 4-0 is pretty reasonable for your first 4 games in your September. As for October, though, then you got Mississippi State, Alabama. Miss State is going to be a win. Alabama, though, I hate to say it. I mean, I think Texas A&M being at home could give them an advantage against Alabama, and that's a potential trap game as well for Alabama there. I think with it being in October, like there's a chance that Texas A&M could definitely give Alabama a run in that matchup, especially if it's a night matchup too. I mean, Texas A&M is always great in those matchups, but Alabama, I just think Alabama is too good of a team. They get the win in the end, but it's going to be close. Very, very close game. I'd say, I mean, both teams have got likely chances to win the Alabama-Texas A&M game. Missouri's going to be a close one as well. I think with it being on the road, that team's also going to be pretty good next season. Then you got South Carolina. That's going to be a win. So 7-1 is your record through your first 8 games, which really in your division, I mean, you got LSU as well coming up, which that's a very important game as well, that LSU matchup. But for Texas A&M, 7-1 is very reasonable in your first 8 games for sure. As for your November, you got Auburn then. That's going to be a closer one. Ole Miss will also be close. Ole Miss could be a really good team next season as well. I like that team quite a bit. And also, it's also on the road too, so you can't forget about that. Prairie View A&M, that's going to be an easy win. Not much to talk about there. But then you got LSU on the road. I think LSU next season is going to be right back to being a contender. I mean, that team was not very good at all in 2020. I mean, it's very safe to say that. That team was just very inexperienced, very young in 2020, which is reasonable. I mean, if you look at LSU in 2019, that team was outstanding just because of how experienced they were with Joe Burrow. And after losing him, it was kind of a tough season in 2020. But LSU, they're going to be right back in the running, I think, in 2021, and that's going to be a tough game there in Baton Rouge. LSU's going to get the win there. I'm going to say 10-2 for Texas A&M next season, which, I mean, even though you're losing to Alabama and LSU, I mean, you're not going to win the division is what I'm predicting here, but I think Texas A&M is definitely capable of being in the running. Like, this is a team that, I mean, if you can get 10 wins, like, that'd be a great season, in my opinion, for Texas A&M. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Texas A&M Aggies. Let me know your record predictions and all of that down in the comments. And I appreciate you guys all watching. If you enjoyed the preview, slap a like on it, subscribe as well, as it does help with the channel, and I'd really appreciate that. But once again, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys later.